Lucy Bolingbroke, your time of reckoning has come. Make your peace.
A pox upon your reckoning. A pox upon you all.
In Hecate's name, I purge thy power. In Hecate's name, I cleanse thy soul. In Hecate's name, I charge thee fate.
In Hecate's name, you shall not. No! You shall not hold me. My power is infinite. I shall be revenged. You will regret this.
Helpless, cold, thy form shall pass, as nothing shalt thou be, forever dimmed in darkness.
Well, with that introduction, there's only one person we could be discussing today, the infamous Lucy Bolingbroke, Countess of Chester, an Aridia who was reckoned in 1141 and a truly pivotal figure in the clash of the Cousins' War. But who was she? What did she do that was so terrible? And how did her reckoning become so well known? I'm Dr. Annette Lynton, and with me today to answer all of this and more is Melanie Howe, an expert on Hycathic magic and a Bethla herself, who is involved with the Nottingham Hycathic Salvation Programme. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure, thank you.
So, we spoke a little bit about the process of a reckoning in episode 2 when we were discussing the life of Alice Amor. But just in case anyone missed that one, tell us please, Melanie, what is a reckoning?
Well, it's understandable that people might not be too familiar with them. There's not been a reckoning in over 100 years.
No, not since the Blomgren sisters during the Second Hycathe War.
Yes, exactly. And they were tricked in the heat of battle. But even then, it was a rare punishment, used only in the case of a Hycathae who has transgressed so severely she can no longer be allowed to wield power. A fitting punishment for the Blomgrens, who are arguably even more notorious than Lucy Bolingbroke. But the reason Lucy's reckoning was so well documented is because it was performed at a time when they were done in public.
Yes, and a message from Maud to her people that although a Hycathae herself, they had nothing to fear from her faith.
Exactly. Of course, these days the ritual would have to be conducted in secret, but in those days they were a public spectacle, an entertainment almost.
Yes, Lucy wasn't the first Hycathae to be reckoned, of course, but she is one of the most significant. So, tell us, Melanie, who was she and what made her so important?
Well, unfortunately, many of the primary sources relating to Lucy were lost in the floods, but she's frequently mentioned in the letters and diaries of those around her, and not always favourably.
Has any man endured a more obstinate wife? Today she played at cards again, when I had expressly forbid it, and won.
She dunked the boy's head in 2 quarts of milk, all for that he had stepped upon her hem.
Take heed, my daughter. Your power is great, but you must amend your pride.
Hellfire consume this most pernicious woman!
Now, whatever others may have thought of her, there is no denying that Lucy Bolingbroke was Hycathe royalty. Born in 1074, daughter of a powerful Hycathae with lands in Lincolnshire, she was even rumoured to be a distant relation of Lady Godiva, whose infamous naked ride is well remembered.
Well, that's never been conclusively proven.
No, true. But they do have an impulsive, independent nature in common. Married 3 times, she had no children of her own, which was unusual for the time.
Oh, yes, but she had no intention of losing her powers to a daughter.
A problem for an aristocratic family, eager for an heir. As Countess of Chester, she had an obligation to carry on the family line, but Lucy, of course, found a way to keep up appearances.
I have done my duty by you and more, yet still you are barren.
You waste your seed on your whores.
Elizabeth is no whore.
Yet she is not your wife.
She gave me a son. That makes her more wife to me than you.
A son? What use is a son if he is not your heir?
If I say he is my heir, who is to question it?
A son who does not live in his father's home, or the world will know him for a bastard.
Then he shall live with us.
I will not raise your whore's son.
You will do as I say, woman.
Next, you'll tell me to claim him as my own.
Until you do your duty and provide me an honest heir, William shall live with us, and you shall treat him as your own blood. Make ready his rooms, and I'll hear no more.
Making Roger de Roumare her second husband think it was his idea she adopt his illegitimate son, William, was a masterstroke of reverse psychology by Lucy. Of course, she was manipulating him all along, but with Lucy determined not to bear a child and Roger anxious to secure the succession of his lands, the ruse worked for both of them. I say his lands, they were of course originally hers, and she was willing to go along with the fiction to retain her property. Lucy inherited a huge estate in Lincolnshire, but under the laws of the time, these passed to her husband on marriage.
Ugh. Unthinkable now, of course. But this was before the first age of Hycathae.
Exactly, the kind of world we might still be living in if Stephen had won the war. God.
Well, of course, it would have been impossible for William to actually be Lucy's son, as, being Hycathae, her first child would have been a daughter. But only Lucy and her closest confidants would know that, of course, as her Hycathic status was not widely known.
And the fiction seemed to suit Lucy well, so much so that she pulled the same trick on her third husband, Ranulf le Mesquin, bringing up both his son and daughter as her own.
Not that she was maternal in any way.
Oh, no, absolutely not. It was purely strategic. In those days, having a strong family network was essential for retaining lands and status. In fact, the marriages themselves were strategic.
Oh, yes. She had little choice over any of them, and the evidence suggests she resented them. So much so that after Ranulf's death in 1129, she paid the king, Henry I, 500 marks for the right not to have to remarry.
I suppose 3 husbands is more than enough. Although her last husband did become something of a plaything to her.
Oh, yes. Her treatment of Ranulf was quite cruel. He was fascinated by the Hycathic faith and magic and begged Lucy to teach him about it.
And not just in theory.
No. She taught him to wield magic through the power of a Hycathae relic, making him an Andratha effectively.
They are known often to be driven mad by the practice.
Well, human minds and bodies are not designed to handle Hycathic power, so yes, Andrathas do often succumb to madness. Which is what happened to Ranulf, of course. We have his diaries where he describes his eagerness and fascination, but Lucy actively encouraged him. He seems to have been a kind of experiment for her. How far could she push him? How much before his mind couldn't cope? It was cold and deliberate, and tells us a lot about Lucy's true nature.
Yes.
There has even been the suggestion that Lucy was investigating how Hycathae relics worked in the hope that she could learn how to reverse the process. Having no children, she knew her powers would be placed into a magical artefact on her death and, well, knowing Lucy, she certainly didn't intend on staying there.
Absolutely not. So, with Ranulf dead and the king paid off, by the time of Stephen's uprising, Lucy is a powerful countess in her own right. Although she has lost Lincoln Castle by this point.
Oh, this is one of my favourite stories.
Do you want to tell it or shall I?
Well, the loss of the castle came about through a scuffle between the usurper Stephen and David I of Scotland. uncle, of course, to Maud, otherwise known as Empress Matilda.
Indeed. And Lincoln would be a strategic benefit if you're King of Scotland.
Oh, very much so. But it's the way the de Chesters got it back. All Lucy's second adopted son Ranulf II's idea. He and his half-brother William concocted a plan.
Where did you find these breeches? Ah! It'll never work, Ranulf.
I have faith, Will. Eliza and Harwise have often been known to visit the constable's wife. Naught will be made of it.
And how will our faces not be known when we collect our wives again? Surely all in Lincoln do know us.
All Lincoln doth know Ranulf and William Lords. But just as commoners, no man will blink. We take a guard, mayhap 2 or 3, then once inside we throw wide the gates and admit our forces.
Ah, 'tis like the tales of Troy.
And did not that ruse work?
These breeches are too tight.
Brilliant.
Oh, it's like something out of a farce.
Oh, but Ranulf was right. It did work.
Yes. The brothers turned up in disguise to collect their wives, seized weapons, admitted their men, and regained the castle. You couldn't make it up.
And nothing the usurper Stephen could do about it. Or at least nothing he chose to do about it. With David of Scotland being Maud's uncle, it was better for Stephen that it at least stayed out of his hands.
So Ranulf and William had done him a favour in that respect.
Exactly. Stephen granted them back their lands and titles to be passed down through Lucy's children and grandchildren, though, of course, it was Lucy who was actually in charge. But she was not a well-loved mistress, it seems.
Oh, no. In fact, her treatment of the citizens of Lincoln was quite cruel. So much so that they petitioned Stephen to save them.
We beg you, sire, free us from this torment.
Our children got hungry while the masters feast.
Their troops run rampant through our lands. Our wives and daughters are not safe.
Yes, it seems unlikely that Stephen would listen to the requests of peasants, but he did indeed return to Lincoln and lay siege to the castle.
His second U-turn on this matter, I think.
Yes, quite so.
As if it couldn't get any more farcical.
There has been much discussion on Stephen's motives at this point. Did he have a genuine concern for the peasants' welfare? Had he thought again about the strategic value of the castle against Scotland? Could it even be revenge against Lucy for the death of his auxiliary garrison at Cambridge 2 years earlier?
It's possible, but that was never proven. And it's unlikely Stephen knew Lucy was involved. But it would make sense that he would want to limit Lucy's power. It is very likely that he knew her to be Neridia, and therefore just about the most powerful woman in England. So
Indeed.
The last person he wants helping Maud.
Absolutely. There is some suggestion, though, that he tried to reason with Lucy, even to bring her over to his side.
Yes. Several written accounts report a meeting between them. There's no record of what was said, but we can make a good guess.
Please, sit. This wine is of the finest vintage.
This is no social call, Countess. Though you were right, this wine is excellent.
I see little point in accepting second best.
I know you are a Hycathae.
Straight to it, I see.
I have witnessed what your kind can do. Let us join our forces. Together, all England would fall before us.
You wish me to betray my sister, Hycathae and rightful queen?
You know as well as I, Matilda has not the heart nor the stomach of a king.
She has the will and the right. You have only a pretender's crown and stolen glory.
I urge you to consider my offer. You have titles, lands, power, but all these will fall if you continue to work against me.
Really? Trouble catching your breath?
Guards!
They cannot hear you. Mark me well, usurper. I am not your plaything. My powers are not for hire. Your time is done. Your only hope is to retire from the field and pray to your god. The Empress shows you mercy. You live only to afford my Empress her victory.
You will regret this, witch! Let me out!
The door is not locked.
So though Lucy had the perfect opportunity to kill Stephen and end the war, she chose not to. She knew his defeat needed to be public and Maud's victory to be earned if she was to solidify her position. Stephen lost no time in besieging the castle, however. He may not have been able to defend against her magic, but he could starve Lucy out. Her son Ranulf did manage to escape the siege and joined Maud's forces, but Lucy became trapped, and Stephen finally had the upper hand. Even as an Iridia, Lucy was not powerful enough to defeat an entire army on her own.
No, she wasn't. And it's at this point that Lucy reaches out to Maud with that infamous letter, on which more than the fortunes of the war were to turn.
We have been besieged these 8 weeks, and our stores are all but empty. Our spies do what they can, but our forces will soon be without food, for we know not when more may be found. The men remain true, but it preys upon their hearts to see their children suffer, dying for want of bread. I wager they will break before too long. I beg you, sister, for sisters we are in spirit, ride to our aid. Help us drive this usurping heathen from our walls, as we shall help you drive him from your lands. In Hecate's name, I pray thee come.
It's terribly moving, actually. It would have taken a lot for Lucy to ask for help in this way. I mean, humility was not one of her qualities, by all accounts.
Very much not.
Yes. But Maud wasn't initially keen to go to Lucy's aid, was she?
Oh, no. Maud had severe doubts about involving Lucy in her plans at all. In fact, she wrote to Gabriella Fitzwalter expressing her concerns.
Though I have no doubt the Countess of Chester is truly in dire need, for her pride would not permit her to beg my help otherwise, I question whether we should ally our cause with her. Though it were better she be our friend than our enemy, I do not trust her ambition. She is Neridia, true, but with Rousemarin's gains, surely we could triumph without her.
Sadly, we don't have Gabriella's reply, but it must have been favourable to Lucy as, 2 weeks after receiving her letter, Maud arrived at the head of an army, trapping Stephen's forces against the castle walls and besieging the besiegers.
Yes. Sadly not much use to Lucy, though, still trapped inside, of course. But they were able to exchange messages, I believe.
Yes. No one knows quite how they did it, and there has been considerable speculation. Lucy's letter mentions spies, of course, and it has been suggested that these may have been members of her staff, able to sneak back and forth through secret passageways, although none have ever been found. But however they managed it, Maud and Lucy were able to make a plan to defeat Stephen.
Now, we won't go into the details of that defeat just yet, though. We'll learn more about that next week when we discuss Gabriella Fitzwalter.
Oh, fantastic. I shall be sure to listen.
Oh, do, Melanie, please do. Thank you. Now, you mentioned that Lucy's letter to Maud changed more than the direction of the war. What did you mean by that?
Well, the defeat of Stephen at Lincoln obviously paved the way for Maud's later final victory, but it also brought Lucy and Maud back together and ultimately led to Lucy's reckoning. Lucy never liked asking for help, believing that, as a Neridia, she was above this. She saw it as a weakness. But in this instance, she had no choice. It was either ask for help or face defeat, which was not a word in Lucy's lexicon.
Oh, absolutely not.
So, choosing to see Maud's assistance as payback for her hand in the sinking of the White Ship 20 years earlier made things more palatable for her.
We are victorious! The usurper flees. It is a great day.
We must now work to make the humans our allies. Let them know that when I am upon my rightful throne, all shall prosper, human and Hycathae alike.
Why do you care so for the humans? They should be as pets to us.
Some may yet do great things.
You are too generous. I have missed thee, Maud, and do thank thee for answering my call so speedily. Thou hast more than repaid thy debt.
My debt? I had no debt to thee. If debts are to be talked of, 'tis rather you in debt to me.
Do you forget so swiftly?
I forget nothing. It was you begged rescue of me.
No more than might be asked of one who has benefited so much by my actions. 'Tis right that favour repay favour.
What favour have you done me? Speak plainly, this is no time for riddles.
Can it be you do not know?
I lose my patience, Lucy.
You cannot think it accident your brother was drowned.
William? The White Ship was your doing? Oh, Hecate! I thought that's Stephen's work.
Stephen? No man could conceive of such a scheme. Had he not such weak bowels, he should have perished too.
You took innocent life. This is too much. You overstep your calling.
I did what I must to ensure your rise.
Do not speak. You have committed murder, transgressed every tenet of our order. This must be answered. You are no true Hycathae.
Beware you do not anger me.
And now you even dare threaten your empress.
You are not my empress. You balk where you should rejoice, cower where you should conquer. A plague upon your queendom.
Oh, she probably shouldn't have said that.
Oh, she probably shouldn't, but she possibly didn't. The sources are secondary, but it's certainly not out of character.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's also been suggested that her being responsible for the White Ship disaster was only a boast. But the evidence is compelling. It's certainly true that both her husband Ranulf and her adopted son William were on board and disembarked not long before the ship sailed. And by then, Ranulf had been an Andratha for some time, of course. It would not be hard for such a powerful Neridia to manipulate him.
But the evidence was compelling enough for Maud, and Lucy's reckoning swiftly followed.
Essence bounded be, thine eyes unseeing.
But in the end, Lucy's plan had worked. Maud became empress, and her reign laid the foundations for the world we know today.
Yes, although Lucy's family also suffered from her actions. With no Hycathae heir and the family shamed, they fell into obscurity, never recovering their previous status.
Yes, terrible shame. Of course, Lucy vowed to return. Do you think there's any likelihood that could occur? Could she actually escape?
Well, it's a good question. It's never been done, as far as we know, but there have been rumours for a long time that the Hycathae of Actau did find a way to reverse the process. Now, this has never been proven, but it doesn't stop many Hycathae from continuing to try. In many ways, the ability to escape a reckoning hold is the Hycathae Holy Grail.
Oh, yes, but how likely is it, do you think, that anyone could succeed?
I suppose anything's possible, but for a reversal, one would need the reckoning hold itself, the object the Hycathae is trapped in. And in the case of Lucy Bolingbroke, no one knows what that is.
I mean, it's just extraordinary. With a Neridia that important, some record must have been kept.
Oh, definitely it will have been. But from the start, it would have been heavily guarded secret. Many Hycathae have searched for it, but so far the secret is still safe, if any record exists at all now.
Oh, there are many theories, of course. Some say she was reckoned into a golden urn that's now at the bottom of the Atlantic. Some say it was a plain wooden box designed to be unnoticeable. It's even been suggested that she was reckoned into a stone that's now built into Lincoln High Temple.
Yes, but my favourite is that she was reckoned into a pearl, which now forms part of the crown jewels in New London. Can you imagine?
Yes, I love that one. Well, wherever and whatever she is, Lucy Bolingbroke has become part of Hycathae legend. And somewhat of a bogey woman, it seems.
Oh, yes. I remember being told as a child to do my practice or Lucy Bolingbroke would get me. I was terrified of her.
Oh, poor Melanie. Well, you're okay now, though. Thank goodness.
Mostly. Although, I think it is probably best that she stays wherever she is. She was temperamental when she was alive. After 900 years in confinement, who knows what she might do? In fact, there's a hint in an intriguing document we believe was written by Lucy herself whilst in prison, awaiting the day of reckoning.
Ah, you're referring to the Testament, of course.
Yes, that one.
So you've actually seen it?
Yes. It's kept in the Salvation Programme archives under controlled conditions as it's incredibly fragile. But I was lucky enough to see it as a student. Of course, the contents have become something of a legend, but it's really astounding to read it in her own hand.
My name is Lucy Bolingbroke, Nereidia and Countess of Chester, cruelly betrayed and falsely condemned by my own kind. They think to hold me an eternal prisoner. But I cry eternal vengeance against them and their heirs. Their reckoning undoes only my mortal form. My will and power remain. Hate growing stronger with every passing moment. And when I have broke apart their magics, for do not doubt I can do it, when the day of my release arrives, I shall rain down fury, such as the world has never seen. My wrath will scorch the skies and make every living being tremble at my name. Remember and beware. Your own day of reckoning is coming.
Woof. It really is powerful stuff.
Oh, let's hope it never happens.
Absolutely. And on that powerful note, we're out of time for today. It just remains for me to thank my delightful guest, Melanie Howe.
Oh, thank you. It really has been a pleasure.
Oh, it's all ours, Melanie, all ours. And I do hope you will join us next week when we will be discussing Gabriella Fitzwalter and the crowning of Empress Matilda. Until then, dear listeners, goodbye.